So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Andrew Marr effectively accusing the Labour Party of being dishonest in their economic policy, saying, the Labour Party saying they won't raise taxes, and Andrew Marr saying effectively they will, and we're all involved in some sort of Labour psychodrama around taxes. Very strange what his accusations are. So we've got 3 clips to play.
Keir Starmer's strange phrase, sticking plaster politics, which I've never heard before. He's the only person I've ever heard use that phrase. But
I don't think that's a bad phrase. Sticking plaster is meant to be something temporary. But, if he doesn't conjoin that with a sticking plaster on like an axe wound, it doesn't really land.
That's his slogan for this short-term policy making.
Yeah.
And then also their short-term fiscal rules. There's a disconnect there, isn't there, Andrew?
There certainly is. Let's be absolutely honest about this. We are all hoping that they're saying one thing before the election and will do something slightly different afterwards, because we all know, we look at the numbers and we look at the taxation take and we look at the strategy, and we know that they are going to have to do radical things if they're going to be a successful government.
And this is where I got annoyed at certain people like Phil and Andrew Marr, because you're assuming that politicians will do the logical thing, when really politics is an emotion, really more of an emotion-driven thing, especially when their main goal is to win. So yes, they will lie, they will cheat, etc. But the idea that they will do the right thing in government, if they don't think that right thing will win them another term, they ain't gonna do it. That's how politicians typically are. So this idea that, Keir Starmer's Labour will be more radical in government than they are during the election, I find a bit laughable, because normally it's the other way around. Governments or, parties before they're elected are quite radical. But when they govern more from the centre. So this idea that they're going to be a bit more radical, I find a bit concerning that Marr would kind of push this kind of nonsense.
They are not talking about now for electoral reasons. So in a sense, we are all complicit in a certain dishonesty in British politics.
And what would that do to the electorate as well? Like if, Labour run and say, we're not going to raise taxes, then once they're in power, within the first year or two, they start raising taxes on people, despite the fact that, on middle and lower earners, we've got the highest tax burden in 70 years. Now, if they raise it on the higher earners, I'd be okay with that. If they made reforms, etc., I'd be okay with that. But surely you'd want to tell that to the public first, because again, all the media can run with, Labour lied and it actually did increase tax. Unless Labour run with the line of, we needed to see the books, and the books were a lot worse than what we thought they were, even though I'm pretty sure all the information is public when it comes to the Chancellor's budget and the OBR forecasts and the analysis and all that's public, so you can see the books. It's not really that well hidden.
Well, Andrew, if you want to.
I think I just have. I'm not. I mean, we are complicit. We think that they're going to do more than they say they're going to do now. And if they don't do more than they say they're going to do now, I think they're going to run into terrible problems with growth in particular.
So there's the key there. He's applying logic here, which is fine, but again, logic doesn't apply to politicians. We've seen that, forever. The fact that Labour in '97 promised to do to implement PR or do a referendum on PR, they never did it. That would have been the logical thing to do. But politicians don't follow logic. Even doing the Brexit referendum, there wasn't a ton of logic just calling it. So this idea that Labour will go big because they have to in order to keep power, I don't know, man. British people suffer a lot of pain and still keep the same people in power. We look at the last 13 years, we have the Tories winning the most number of seats, not necessarily winning outright, but winning and governing nonetheless. So this idea of logic and growth, etc., it doesn't make sense. I guess you can use the argument that Labour are saying they're going to grow the economy, that's where they're going to get the money from. If they don't grow the economy, what are they going to do then? That's problematic. That's problematic for Labour. It will be. So I don't see what good this strategy is going to do for Labour, honestly. But the whole idea that they're just going to grow the economy, you can manage the finances better, but you will hit a stone wall once you run out of finances to manage better. Once you've managed all the money as well as you can and you get, maybe 0.34% growth, what do you do from there? Because that new money, that growth money, is not really going to do a lot for you, especially if people's wages don't go up and other things don't happen, etc. Just because the country gets growth doesn't mean that people are doing better. That's not how economics works, unfortunately. But Rachel Reeves would know that as a former Bank of England economist.
I just don't see how we're going to be able to grow the economy without a much better trading relationship with the trading bloc next door. And I don't see how we're going to have a fairer economy in which ordinary working families feel that they are being treated properly, unless we look again at the tax system.
I mean, again, Rishi Sunak pays a lower marginal tax rate than a lot of people in this country, which is shambolic, in my opinion. That is criminal. Not as in, against the law, but criminal, as in that should never happen. That, rich people should pay lower marginal taxes than working class people. And, improving the Brexit deal, that would be good. Getting improvements onto the TCA, that would be good. But the issue is that actually going to happen? How much will Labour do given the constraints that they put onto themselves, which is they've said no to dynamic alignment. So, you are going to put kind of a cap on yourself with how much alignment you can actually get with the EU and how successful that's going to be, because there's still going to be checks. Even between Switzerland and the EU, there are still checks. Between Norway and the EU, there's still paperwork, etc. So there is a limit to how much success you can actually have.
And, then there's all the other issues, like the vast number of jobs which are going to be taken out quite soon by AI. I hope people inside the Labour Party are thinking about this. And
they're clueless on AI, let's be honest now. Most people, for the vast majority of people, are clueless on AI. So I wouldn't hold my breath on the Labour Party understanding AI, apart from the fact that they say they're going to use it to improve NHS waiting lists, like, OK, Ultron.
And where those people are going to work and how they're going to deal with the political and the economic fallout, I kind of slightly doubt it, but I really hope they are. I just think when they come in and they see this storm of problems coming ahead of them, they're going to have to be much tougher and more radical than they're talking about at the moment.
I mean, we spoke about this a few weeks ago, but is there a risk, Andrew, do you think, that...
So we'll cut to the next clip because this one's ending. And I wouldn't have called the podcast Crumbling Britain. I would have called it Broken Britain, unless someone's already taken that. But you can have that one for free, Andrew.
We have a kind of slightly tepid, watery, middle-of-the-road political discourse at the moment. And I've been part of it, I'm sure, over the past year or two.
A past decade or two. Since you had the Andrew Marr show, you've most definitely been a part of it. I mean, let's not forget that, Boris Johnson picked you specifically over Andrew Neil because you give people a much easier interview.
Where my basic assumption has been the grown-ups have taken over the Conservative Party again. The loons are out, and we've got sort of serious-minded, slightly centrist people coming back. And if they are kicked out, that's fine, because we've got quite centrist, quite similar kind of people coming into the Labour Party. And I just think...
That's a news host. That's an interview with an agenda there, saying, the sensible people back in. By what metric? Really? I guess you can argue Sunak is more sensible than Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, but it feels like he's got very much an agenda there by saying, everything's going to work out now, it's fine. And, realistically, he should be criticising these, so-called sensible, not criticising, but, questioning them, the sensible people, as hard as he criticises the loons, honestly.
We are going to go through a period of economic and political turbulence in which that kind of cautious centrism won't wash.
Yeah, and also this cautious centrism has got us in the problem in the first place. If we go back to the austerity years and the sensible government of David Cameron, the slick, balance the books rhetoric that we had then. I mean, we're seeing some of the effects of the false economy of austerity now. The whole point...
We've been seeing that for 13 years, pal. I don't know where you've been, but we've seen the effects of austerity since it began on people with disabilities, on people who are poor, people who are single parents, etc. We've seen that already. The main reason you're seeing more of the impacts of austerity is bankrupting councils. It's the fact that the country has not had much growth over the last decade, and that growth has not been distributed that well at all. So this idea that we're only just seeing the effects of austerity, like my man's lived under a rock.
Austerity was to save money, but if you don't invest and you don't keep things ticking over...
The whole point of austerity wasn't to save money, it was to shrink the state. This man's level of economic illiteracy and lack of political history, is this man is he 18 or something? Has he just come into the game? Honestly, where has he been for the last decade? 'Cause this is embarrassing from the New Statesman. The whole point of austerity was to shrink the state. Even George Osborne admits that Gordon Brown did the right things kind of just after the recession. It was the Tories that flipped and said, we're broke, we ain't got any money. And that was when our debt to GDP was around 30 to 35%, I think. And if you look at our debt to GDP now, it's 100%. So the argument that the country were broke, if we were broke back then, what the hell are we now, in some sort of financial apocalypse? It's just stupid. And, Marr kind of going on Sky News and talking about this as well.
Wait for the Conservatives to lose rather than...
It probably is.
Put up something for Labour to win, as it were.
It's a very, very balanced panel, as you can see here as well.
It probably is, but we're living in this kind of weird, phony war at the moment where Starmer and Rachel Reeves are absolutely crystal clear they are not going to raise any tax rates across the board because they know the minute they start to indicate, then the Conservatives completely go for them. So you ask them, you were saying to him, are you going to raise taxes? He has to say no.
I mean, again, he doesn't have to say no. The problem is the way you frame it. When under Corbyn they said we're going to raise taxes on the top 5%. There was a guy who didn't realise that he was in the top 5% because he earned over 80,000. If Labour had said, we're going to raise tax on people who make over 150k, it's very definitive who those people are. Because some people who might earn 30 or 40k, they might think, oh, I'm in the top 5%, I'm doing well. That was one of the problems that Corbyn ran into. But, if you said we're going to reform capital gains tax, the people who make money off shares, I struggle to see how the Daily Mail are going to try and convince people that's a bad idea. So it just doesn't, they don't have to say this idea that he's kind of manufacturing consent in a way that, of course Labour have to say they're going to do nothing, because if they don't, the Daily Mail are going to go after him. It's just sad, Andrew, sad.
I'd say a couple of things about
Very quickly.
this. A couple of things about this. First of all, Labour are relying on growth because they're going to have an activist government with a plan. I think that's highly optimistic. Second, I think in due course, when they're in power, they are going to have to raise some money, and they are going to do it, but they're not going to tell you about it now. Melanie?
Again, it's just complete dishonesty. This kind of stuff, this kind of just straight lies, I think it chips away at the belief people have in politicians. I know it's in the ground now, and you shouldn't really believe politicians anyways, but if they put in the manifesto they are not going to raise taxes, and given that the fact that they've gone around saying they're going to not raise taxes or really reform taxes, and they go ahead and do that when they're in charge, I just don't see that going down well at all. And I think the Daily Mail will use that as more of an attack, especially if Labour don't get much done when they're in charge, which, based on what they're saying, they're not going to get much done.
I think this interview precisely demonstrates why the Labour vote is so soft, why people don't like the Conservative government, but they don't trust the Labour Party to deliver anything, because they don't even know what they're going to deliver. Everything seems to change the whole time. Keir Starmer changes his position and so on. But, I think, what Sharon Graham said, much of it was, we want to go back to old Labour, we want trade union power and so on. But her fundamental diagnosis is correct. When you look at Starmer's Labour and the Conservative Party, what's to choose between them?
I think one is a lot more competency, given the fact that the Tories have proved themselves utterly incompetent. And I think it's more of just a belief that things can be managed better, that the Tories aren't the party of fiscal responsibility. I think that myth has finally died now, and I think the idea that there's not much to choose between them is true to an extent, and also isn't true to an extent. Just managing things better is a lot better, is a bit better, and will improve things in the country. The problem is you will get stonewalled to a point. There's a level cap on this, an XP cap, should we say, in gaming terms, where you won't be able to level up unless you do certain things, and that's one of the pitfalls this version of Labour might fall into. And absolutely, it's the case that this election is the Tories to lose. Effectively, that this is. They've screwed up so badly with the interest rate rises, with the cost of living crisis, and their inability to do anything. I think that has cost them the most. It could have been any leader at this point to bring Labour in, but the idea that their poll lead is soft, I don't think it's that soft. Given that it's more based on the hatred of the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party have given a lot of people a lot of reasons to hate them. So I don't think it's that soft. I don't see Rishi Sunak turning it around, and I just see this as a complete disaster for everyone involved here. I don't think there's anything more I kind of want to discuss on this video. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This one, again, Marr kind of accusing the Labour Party of dishonesty over taxes. Do you believe that he's correct here? Should we continue to wait for a manifesto? Because if we go off what Labour, kind of the senior members of the Labour Party and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are saying here, there are going to be no new taxes because she doesn't see the point. She doesn't, have any use for the money, even though Labour are going to have to spend a lot to kind of get the economy moving, because it is slumped. It is slumped really hard. And, for anyone who comes out with the idea, we ain't got any money, like, again, Clement Attlee, founded the NHS when the GDP of our country was, the debt to GDP of our country was 200%. At the moment, the UK is about 100%. So this idea we've got no money and blah, blah, blah is just a myth that people who don't understand economics push, because they don't understand economics and don't want to learn. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.